Hello everyone, and welcome to my Update US Gossip channel. Tracy Quartermaine had always believed she was indestructible, a woman carved from granite, as formidable as the family empire she'd fought to protect her entire life. But fate has a cruel sense of irony, and on the night she confronted Martin Gray, everything she had ever built, her pride, her fortune, and ultimately her life, crumbled into dust. The Quartermaine mansion, once her fortress, had become a war zone of secrets, betrayal, and heartbreak. Tracy, who had clawed her way back into power time and time again, suddenly found herself teetering on the edge of ruin. The confrontation began innocently enough, a demand for the truth about a missing fortune and a web of deceit that traced back to Martin's shady legal maneuvers. But as their words grew sharper and emotions spiraled out of control, the unthinkable happened. The woman who had once outwitted titans of industry and political sharks alike found herself undone by the one man she thought she could manipulate. Martin had been her ally once, or so she thought. He knew her secrets, her vulnerabilities, the dark corners of her life she never allowed anyone else to see. He knew how she'd falsified documents to protect the Quartermaine estate, how she'd pushed people out of her way to maintain control, and how she'd covered up the scandal that could have destroyed her family's legacy decades ago. And now, standing in front of her with that cold smirk, he used every piece of that knowledge like a weapon. "You can't buy your way out of this one, Tracy," he hissed, his voice low, dangerous, dripping with bitterness. For the first time, Tracy felt fear, a raw, humiliating emotion she'd spent her whole life denying. The confrontation spiraled, accusations flying like daggers. She called him a liar and a parasite. He called her a hypocrite and a destroyer of lives. Each word was another nail in the coffin of what was once a dangerous alliance built on convenience and ambition. But the real shock came when Martin revealed the final betrayal. He had turned her in. Everything Tracy had done to shield her family, every secret deal, every manipulated account, was now in the hands of the authorities. "You wanted power, Tracy? Now you can have all the attention that comes with it," he sneered, tossing a folder onto her desk, its contents spilling out like poison, evidence of her financial misdeeds, wire transfers, and confidential notes she'd thought long buried. For a moment, the indomitable Tracy Quartermaine was silent. Her heart pounded in her chest, the reality sinking in like ice. Her empire was gone. Her family would be disgraced. And the man she thought she could control had outplayed her in the cruelest way possible. She tried to threaten him, to reclaim the upper hand, but the look in Martin's eyes told her it was already too late. He was finished being her pawn. When the truth hit the headlines, the fallout was immediate and catastrophic. ELQ stock plummeted. Her family, disgusted and horrified, turned their backs on her. Even Ned, who had spent years defending his mother's ruthless methods, couldn't forgive this betrayal. Brooke Lynn refused to answer her calls, and Monica, ever the moral compass of the Quartermaines, looked at her with pity instead of anger, 1,000 times worse. Tracy's world, once filled with control and dominance, became a cage of silence and shame. Every corridor of that mansion echoed with ghosts of her mistakes. The woman who had prided herself on never needing anyone suddenly found herself completely alone. And Martin, he didn't escape unscathed either. Word spread that he had taken a hefty sum as part of his deal with the authorities, walking away clean while Tracy faced the storm alone. The media painted her as the villain, the greedy matriarch who lost everything to her own arrogance. Yet behind the headlines, those who truly knew her saw a deeper tragedy. Tracy had lived her entire life fighting for respect, for control, for validation that never came. Every ruthless decision she'd made was born not from greed, but from fear of being forgotten, of being seen as weak, of fading into irrelevance in a world that had already moved on without her. In the weeks that followed, Tracy retreated from public life. The mansion's grand halls became her prison. Her health began to decline under the weight of disgrace and despair. She stopped attending family dinners, stopped answering calls, and the woman once known for her cutting wit and sharp tongue became a shadow of herself. The fierce light in her eyes dimmed, replaced by something hollow, almost lost. She replayed that confrontation with Martin over and over again in her mind, his words, his betrayal, her own pride. If she had just apologized, if she had just shown a sliver of humility, maybe things could have been different. But that wasn't who Tracy Quartermaine was. She had built her entire life around strength, and admitting defeat was never an option, until it was forced upon her. Her final days were quiet, almost eerily so. The woman who once commanded boardrooms and silenced enemies with a glare was now confined to her bedroom, surrounded only by faded portraits and the sound of rain against the window. Brooke Lynn eventually visited, her anger softened by time and guilt. They spoke briefly, awkwardly. Tracy tried to apologize, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she simply said, "Don't ever let ambition make you forget who you are." It was advice born from regret, a confession wrapped in a warning. Brooke Lynn left in tears, promising to make things right for the family, unaware that it would be the last time she'd see her grandmother alive. The night Tracy died, the house was still. Monica found her the next morning, sitting by the window, a faint smile on her lips, a glass of whiskey by her side, and a letter resting on her lap. The letter was addressed to Martin. It wasn't a curse or a threat, but something far more haunting. In it, she forgave him. "You did what I never could," she wrote. "You told the truth. Maybe you freed me from the lie I built my life around." Those words spread quickly through the family, igniting a mix of sorrow and admiration. Even Martin, when he read it, was visibly shaken. For all his scheming, he hadn't wanted her to die. He just wanted to be free of her control. But in the end, his liberation came at the cost of her life. The town mourned Tracy Quartermaine in its own conflicted way. Some called her ruthless, others, a legend. The Quartermaine family hosted a private memorial, attended by both her allies and enemies. Ned spoke briefly, his voice breaking as he said, "She wasn't perfect. But she was ours. And she never stopped fighting for this family, even when it destroyed her." That was the truth of Tracy's story. Her strength was her curse, her love her undoing. She'd fought too hard, for too long, and in the end, it wasn't Martin or scandal that took her down, it was exhaustion, the final cost of a lifetime spent in battle. For Martin, her death was a turning point. The victory he thought he wanted turned to ash. He couldn't escape the guilt that followed him everywhere, the image of her defiant eyes in their last confrontation haunting him. The legal world he once thrived in became suffocating. He left town quietly, disappearing into obscurity, burdened by the legacy of the woman he'd destroyed. Yet even from beyond the grave, Tracy's influence lingered. Her will contained surprises, a final twist worthy of the woman herself. She left most of her fortune not to her family, but to charity, claiming it was time to balance the scales. It was her last act of redemption, proof that somewhere beneath that icy exterior, Tracy had always longed for peace. In the months after her passing, the Quartermaine mansion felt emptier, quieter. Monica often caught herself expecting to hear Tracy's biting sarcasm echo through the halls, only to be met with silence. Ned took over the family business, vowing to lead with integrity, while Brooke Lynn pursued her music with renewed purpose, saying she wanted to make her grandmother proud. They didn't erase Tracy's memory, they honored it, flaws and all. Because despite her mistakes, she had given everything for the family name. And that, in its own tragic way, was love. In the end, Tracy's life became a cautionary tale, a reminder that power, when driven by fear and pride, can destroy the very things it's meant to protect. Her confrontation with Martin wasn't just a clash of egos, it was the explosion of decades of secrets, guilt, and unspoken pain. And when the dust finally settled, she was gone, but not forgotten. The world would remember Tracy Quartermaine not just as the woman who lost everything, but as the one who dared to fight until her last breath. Will Tracy accept Martin's easy way out of Drew's lawsuit? Martin Gray will give Tracy Quartermaine an easy out from Drew Kane's lawsuit. But after what transpires at Monica Quartermaine's will reading later, will Tracy ultimately accept it? Drew is suing Tracy for forcing him to miss the funeral of Monica. Martin and Tracy meet at Bobby's, where they sit at a table outside the restaurant without even having a cup of coffee or tea. The conversation is tense, as Martin shows her the summons, documenting Drew's lawsuit for assault, because she pushed him out of All Saints Chapel in his wheelchair. Tracy laughs, as Martin twists the words through him out into a definition of a physical attack. Martin says that by excluding Drew from his mother's funeral, she made Drew's previous injury worse and caused him emotional distress. However, Monica did adopt Drew as an adult before he went missing. Aside from that, he never met her until he arrived in Port Charles with the memories of Jason Morgan and informed Martin that Monica had even called him, but he had not answered. Tracy initially refuses Martin's offer of an easy escape from Drew's lawsuit. Martin gives Tracy an easy way out of Drew's lawsuit, but Tracy initially refuses to take it and says she'll see Drew and Tracy in court. Tracy rants that the lawsuit is the epitome of frivolous, and laughs off the lawsuit, quite sure that it will be thrown out. Tracy leaves Martin holding his subpoena, reiterating that she will see Drew and Monica in court, and she makes no apologies to Drew for excluding him from Monica's funeral. Martin comes back with accusations that are probably on target. Tracy cannot admit when she's wrong, not ever, and doesn't have a lick of kindness for anyone. Tracy points her finger and tells him he's wrong except in the case of Drew. Following the reading of the will Tracy alter her mind? Tracy leaves the meeting with Martin not having a care in the world about the financial costs of fighting the lawsuit, but then she doesn't know what's going to happen. Tracy is certain that either she or Michael Corinthos will inherit Monica's home after the reading of her will. However, Tracy is horrified when the will, which she intends to contest, is read and all she receives is an old jar of pickle Lila. Everyone is shocked. With this possibly fake shiftless sister Veronica Bard getting the house, Tracy may have to start paying room and board. Will Martin's offer remain valid and Tracy's decision to apologize to Drew changed as a result of this development?